Good evening, everybody. Check out the new top-down view. Woo! Isn't it nice? So this will just be a very quick Plum update. The reason there hasn't been a video in a little while is, and I've just realised that I've forgotten to close the window, but you know what, it is a bit warm in here. The reason there hasn't been a video in a little while is that I've just been extremely busy, both with work and home commitments, so sorry about that. But I'm trying to do one now, and hopefully you'll actually be watching this rather than me just rambling to myself in my bedroom again. So, in making this particular Plum update video has also been a little bit difficult for me, because mostly because I have been mucking around with all this new format, this top-down, working out the tripods, trying out various different lenses of Mum's. They're in the bags at the moment, but also trying this one. Check out this one. This is redonkulous. Whew. For some reason, along with that came a whole pile of baggage about the audio recording and editing and making sure the sound is smooth, and what kind of transitions do you have to use so that it doesn't detract from what's going on. I don't want to use the cheesy like star fades and all that kind of crap. But at the same time, I don't want it to look too jarring, and trying to learn all about these different things. And then throw on top of that the fact that my main and powerful laptop is a Linux exclusive laptop, so trying to do video editing on Linux has been a challenge. Trying to use Kden Live, which is not bad, it for the most part works, but it's just quite clunky and a little bit crashy, and that's been frustrating. And to be honest, it's just been getting me down, because I'm just not capable of producing the ridiculously high production value thing that for some reason I'm demanding of myself on my first ever attempt at using a damn tripod. So hopefully I can get past that. And yeah, that's this. As Mr. AVE would say, and that is this. So, where are we with the Plum? Okay, there are three main things that are going on with the Plum at the moment. Well, I suppose four. The fourth that I suddenly thought of would just be the fact that there's been no progress on the memory module so far. I guess just after doing all this, I needed to put it aside for a bit and take a break from it. So that's still there, it's still pending. In the meantime, I have taken the decision to split the Plum, so now it comes in separate parts, and the reason for that is purely practical. It was just going to get longer and longer and longer and become entirely unmanageable from us just sort of manoeuvring it around, moving it, being able to access all the things on my desk, and even just being able to work on it, because it's very difficult when you've got this really, really long breadboard and it goes all the way over there, but the thing you need to work on is right up at the end, and you find yourself trying to do that the whole time because there's no room back here to put the rest of it. So as much as I would have really, really liked to have continued with the one continuous breadboard theme, it's just not maintainable. I'm not going to be able to keep going like that, and I will have to break it up at some point. And I have, for the most part, just been avoiding that question. It's very much been the elephant in the room. So I've decided to finally make a decision regarding that, and the decision is such that it will be in multiple different modules. So I suppose at the moment I've got 4 modules I can use. I've got the original 16-byte memory module, the new 64K memory module that's coming along. I have an ALU module, and I have the register module. And the idea is that each module, the top breadboard, so there isn't one on here, but there will be, or I might have to rejiggle this, but anyway, the top breadboard is going to be the interface board. So these are 74HC245 bus transceivers, and I'll probably do another video at some point going into detail on what those are, because I just want this to be a very, very quick update. I don't want to I'm going to try really hard to avoid going into detail on anything at the moment. But suffice to say, the job of these is just to keep each module isolated from the others, to help, basically just help with the interconnectivity between everything, because each module shouldn't be concerned about what it's connected to. And this is just something that in programming, certainly, we call this abstraction, and it's just the idea that your module goes, you know what, forgetting everything else, let's just assume that nothing else exists. I don't need to worry about that. I'm just me, what am I going to do? Well, an ALU will have 2 input ports, an output port, and we'll have some control signals that at the moment will go in here, but they'll get brought up to the interface board. So that's what's going on. Another thing that I have started doing with Plum was experimenting with new and better, more aesthetically pleasing methods of power distribution. And you can see that here. This is an experiment. So what I had before were these, they're all tangled up, these sort of chains of little breadboard plugs, and they were pretty good. They worked for the most part, but it turned out they were quite inflexible, and eventually, after enough length, they had the same problem as I just keep experiencing, which is that, you know, jumping power from one to the next, eventually it just doesn't get all the way to the end. The signal fades, essentially. So my hope was that I would just have one kind of spine of these going all the way along the side of the Plum and just hooking in everywhere. But problems include this depending on it depends on there being room on the edges to put them in. And you can see here, I'll just try an experimental zoom. There we go. So you can see here that there just isn't space to put that in. So you may have observed in some of my previous videos that on the register board they were further up and they were kind of there. Which was all very well and good, but for one thing it means that, if you can see that that wire is, sorry, let's bring the zoom back. Try to hold it a better way around. There we go. No, that's probably not the best way around because now it's in darkness, but you can kind of see that this wire gets bent and misshapen because of the plug that was there. So it requires a lot of side clearance and also clearance underneath. They're just quite bulky. So what I've made instead are plugs of this style. So again, just a tiny little strip of breadboard with some header pins soldered into it. It's a 2x3 piece of header, essentially, with the middle 2 pins removed. And where the middle 2 pins would be is where the red and black wires go in at the top, and then they're soldered from the top. Which is actually not that tricky. I thought it would be a lot trickier than it was. So the advantage of these is that they're more flexible on where I can put them. So for instance, I can have them bridging across sections in the power rail like this, so it can go there and it can sit across those, which on these breadboards isn't really that big a deal, but on these breadboards is a lot more useful, because these ones have the annoying split rails. So if I plug them into the middle there, then both sides of the rail get power, which is handy. Now, because of that, I knew that any modules that are built with these breadboards are going to need to have all of these plugs in a line, in one strip. So that's when I thought, well, I'll experiment with doing that on this, because on the register module, I know that there's a space at the same point on each one because it's the same circuit replicated. So that was what this experiment was, and it kind of works. It works pretty good. I quite like the visual effect of the wire getting thinner and thinner as it goes off. It's kind of you know, natural, almost like leaf-like. But it starts getting a little bit difficult and unwieldy and a little bit harder to keep pretty the more strands you put in them. I think this is probably the limit, 6 plugs in one winding that I would care to do. Though I think maybe actually 3 per winding is probably a better idea. But the one advantage of having this many wires on it, though, is that when I get to the end, I can twist the wires up using a pair of chunky pliers to grab the end and twist them round. And that makes for some extremely sturdy, almost solid metal contacts that are then very... Oh, well, my power box has fallen down the back of the desk. I'll have to go retrieve that, but it makes it very convenient for use with the push-down springy speaker terminal type plugs that I've got on my power box, and also makes it a lot easier to put screw terminals on, or the good old Wago series connectors, which are pretty nice as well. So, you know, swings and roundabouts. I can also see where I must have got distracted while I was twisting it and ended up going backwards on myself. You know, if I was to add another one there, I could perhaps pretend like it was meant to be that way and the one in the middle is where it reverses, but no. Ultimately, this harness here was an experiment, and I've learnt a few things from it. I definitely want to continue with this style of power distribution. It's pretty good, and I think it can be made quite aesthetically pleasing. So yeah, that's power. That's what I've been doing with regards to that. The split, I've split it all up, and oh yes, in order to connect the modules, I'll make more of these braided wires. Also, these are just quite therapeutic to make, just sitting and crimping pins on. I mean, the crimping of the pins will, you know, it makes the ends of your fingers a little bit sore after a while, but I can make a good, you know, a couple of cables in the evening, and that's quite relaxing, quite therapeutic to just wind them up. So I'll make some more of these, and these will allow me to just plug into the various modules and connect things together. Allows me a lot of flexibility without having to unpick all the wires every time and worry about bending the wires and ruining the aesthetic. I will also put a little bit of effort into working out how to make the links, the interface boards along the top look nice as well. So there'll be another board up here, and then there'll be jumpers that go across, things like that. So I'll be looking into that, and obviously, as you can probably tell, it's this machine is the architecture and the construction of this machine is very aesthetically driven. So yeah, I make no apologies for that. It's a beautiful thing. I kind of consider it to be an art piece more than anything else. It's yeah. So there is one other thing that is currently pending that I'm doing on here, but it looks like I'm about to hit the clip limit on this camera, and I'm pretty sure that's down to the limitations of the FAT32 file system. So I'm approaching 4 gigs worth of video on this clip, and we'll have to cut to talking about the last thing. But the last thing is actually functional and involves a little bit of theory, so yeah, let's do a little. I'll have to jump cut. I'll jump cut. That'll be the extent of my video editing for this. I will clip 2 things together. So let's go do that. And we're back. Cool. So the last thing that is changing in the Plum is something on the ALU, and it does actually relate to processing. And that is that as it stands, or as it stood rather, the Plum's ALU was only capable of adding 2 digits together, 2 numbers together, which were presented on these 2 buses. I need to wire in that one as well. But on the left and the right buses, so it can add 2 and 3 and give you 5. Cool. What it couldn't do was add in the carry from a previous edition, and that's what I've started doing now. So the way that works is each of these adders, these are 4-bit adders, so there's one here and there's one here, and this is the lower nibble, lower 4 bits of the byte, and here's the upper 4 bits of the byte. Now, when you're adding 2 4-bit numbers together and the answer goes into a 5th bit, it would require 5 bits to represent the answer. What happens is we end up with a carry out, so this is essentially our 5th bit here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bits. Now, the carry out of this adder is fed in to the carry input of the higher order adder. So if a carry was raised here, it gets added into here, along with the left and right operands. And that's all very well and good, and that means that we can do addition on 8-bit words, which is excellent. However, like the lower nibble adder, the upper nibble adder also has a carry out, for in the event that the result would require 9 bits to represent. And so here's our 9th bit. So we end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 bits. So what we do with that is we store it in a place that would generally be known as the status register or the flags register. And the flags register is a special register that where each bit of its word represents a piece of information about the state of the machine. So when we have a carry flag or a carry bit, what that means is when that's on, it means that the previous calculation that we did generated a carry, and that got stored over here. So when we do further additions, we can keep in mind that we had a carry in the previous one. So what that would allow us to do is add 16-bit numbers. We can do the addition on the lower byte of the 16-bit word, and if that generated a carry, much like with the 4-bit word into the 8-bit adder, if the lower byte of the 16-bit word generated a carry, then that gets added into the upper byte of the 16-bit word. So that's what we need to do. So this is a what kind of chip is that? I can't remember. That's a 74HC273, and it's another octal D-type register, basically just a register that takes 8 bits. And it is currently hooked up, the input of that is hooked up to the output of the carry signal here. So when a carry is generated, it goes to the input here, and this chip would receive the clock pulse, which would go, yep, okay, write whatever is on this input, which would be the carry, and store it here, and it happily obliges. What we then have to do is to take the output from here and feed it back into the carry input of the lower nibble. So we end up creating a loop. The carry signal goes, because obviously there are carries internally between each full adder. So carry, 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 up, and then back round and in. So you end up creating a sort of a loop of carry. Now that's still pending at the moment, because with the way that this has been wired so far, the carry signal is also used to do the 2's complement. And again, I'll now that I've got well, I haven't got, this is still Mum's camera and tripod, so before I wear out her patience, I should probably record some theory videos, and I'll do one on 2's complement because it is mind-blowing magic. It really is. But essentially what happens in 2's complement is that you take the number that you want to make negative, you invert all the bits, so all the zeros become 1s and the 1s become 0s, and you add 1. And add 1 is equivalent to just saying carry. There's a carry in. So until recently there was a bridge, an orange wire that connected from here, that input there, to this orange signal here, and this is the active high to indicate that we want to do a subtraction, which means negate the second operand. So I need to split those out at the moment, which means that currently this is the carry in signal for the whole of the 8 bits worth of adder here, and it's currently tied low because I've just separated it out from there. So I can always carry 1 in by tying that high, and now we're never carrying 1 in because it's low. So what I need to do is essentially, if I can find it a little bit difficult, so I would take this carry input signal and I would take the output from so that is the same signal that goes to this first LED here. I'm casting shadows. Need to be more aware of where my lights are. But it's still practice. Stop demanding perfection, Daniel. So yeah, take the output of the carry signal and feed it into the carry input of the least significant adder. Great. That means that the ALU is now hardwired to always carry in. And the only thing that's essentially done now. All additions will all take into account the carry from the previous addition that was done. The only thing that's still missing from here is that I need to feed in the clock signal to this chip, and that would go in there. And yeah, I need a tidy way of doing that as well. So again, because the ALU will now require a clock signal, I will take that clock signal up to the interface board up here, and there will be an input for the clock there. So the only other thing that needs to be done, essentially, is to be able to say, well, this carry-in signal needs to be high when either when there was a carry from before or when we're doing a subtraction, because we still need to add the extra 1 in when we're doing a subtraction. So I need to add some logic there, and that's where I'm starting on this. When I've got something working, I'll run through it, and I might draw a hasty circuit diagram on the whiteboard. But that's where Plum is in terms of some interesting computer-related, processor-related electronics. Now, I would also need to make the decision on whether or not... Okay, so there are kind of 2 ways to present this in processor architectures that I've seen, at least, so far. And one is where you would have 2 instructions, add and add with carry. So add ignores the state of the carry flag and just adds the two numbers that you give it. Add with carry will add the two numbers that you give it, but it will also add 1 if the carry status flag is set. And I believe that that's kind of the way the Z80 chips would do it. Don't quote me on that. I'm thinking I'm going to do it the 6502 way, and that is simply that the ALU will it will only have one add instruction, and that add instruction will always take into account the carry. So if you want to do an add, and you want to be sure that you're not going to add 1 from the previous addition that you did, so say you do one addition and then you want to do a completely separate addition over here, you would need an instruction that would clear the flags register. And at the moment this register being here is just very temporary while I work out what I'm doing and I figure things out. Because I would quite like all the registers to be on an even footing, at an equal level. So theoretically, I should be able to just say, if I want to clear the carry or clear all the flags, I can just say use the same LDI, the load immediate instruction, to say set this register to 0, and I just happen to give it the address of the flags register. So that's what I'm thinking I'll do at the moment, because that way I shouldn't need an extra instruction for it. I mean, I will need to execute an extra instruction to clear the carry before doing the new addition, but I won't need to define an extra instruction. I won't need a special instruction that says add with carry and add without carry, and I won't need a special instruction that says clear the flags register. Because if this flags register is like the others, then as I say, I can use the LDI instruction to clear it. If it isn't like the others, then I can always just execute 0 plus 0, and or some kind of known addition that I know will not produce a carry, and then it would set the carry to 0, and then I can continue safely knowing that there isn't going to be any state left over from the previous addition in the flags register, which can now affect my new operation.
And the kitty is Fluffy. Hello, Fluffy. Meow. Hello.